right, welcome. Well, I am Alyssa Fisher. I am the Director of Communication here at Cal-Pac, and you are at the Learning Labs. Tonight we have the Reverend Trudy Robinson from San Diego First here with us, and she's going to share about church in the digital age. I am going to hijack you for just a couple minutes just to promote a little bit about what's going on here in the Learning Labs. This is a usually weekly, you'll understand why I'm saying that, but usually weekly webinar series where we try to provide some practical tools for your church, your ministry, whether you are clergy, whether you are lay, however you're involved in ministry. We hope that we can provide some tools to make that a little bit easier, give you some ideas, and give you some takeaways that you can implement right away. So we are kind of in the middle of our fall series, and we're so excited to have Church in the Digital Age as our conversation tonight. Next week, we have 3 sessions. So we are going to start on Monday with an introduction to Compass, which is the new retirement program from Westpath that's starting next year. So that's going to be a really exciting session. We're going to have Westpath there to chat with us, as well as Wanda, who's our benefits manager. I'm putting the link in the chat now so you can see what we have going on and where to register. That's Monday night. Tuesday night, we have Aaron Hawkins, our Executive Director of Connectional Ministries, chatting with us about cherishing community, cultivating the future, kind of doing a State of the Union on our conference, if you will, but also just having hopefully a generative conversation about where we're moving, what our priorities are. And so that's Tuesday night. And then Friday morning, we are kicking off Charge Conference season, everybody's favorite time. So Jennifer Gaylord and some of our district support people will be here to chat about conference forms, hopefully making them a little bit easier for you, but also just walking you through some of the changes and how to fill them out. And then there will be a good amount of time there to answer your questions. And that is the first of 4 sessions about charge conferences that are all the same. So you just pick one that you want to go to, and then that's where you can get your questions answered. I also want to share that we'll have some additional support for charge conference season, and look out for an email about that on Thursday. But we have some cool kind of community support options happening there. So that is what's happening all just next week in the Learning Lab. So we are excited to have you here, and I'm going to pass it to Reverend Trudy to kick us off to talk about what we're here for, which is church in the digital age. So thank you so much for coming and joining us tonight. One more disclaimer is that I saw her talk about this in February, and I pretty much immediately emailed her and said, will you please bring this to the Learning Labs? And she pretty much immediately replied back, yes. So we're so thankful for you and for this information and this conversation tonight.
Thank you, Alyssa. I appreciate that very much. Hi, everyone. I really appreciate you joining me. I was kind of afraid that it would be just like all my family and friends. So it's nice to see that I have some faces I don't actually know. In fact, Ken and Art, it looks like you guys are coming from the same place, and I'm jealous, but I guess we've been Zooming enough to know that that's not really where you are. Is that true? Oh, and you're muted. So
yeah,
sorry.
I see. No, it's just where I would like to be. Yeah.
There you go. I like that. I need to employ that a little bit more. Well, thank you so much. I wanted to just spend a little bit of time chit-chatting with you before I showed you my slides. I told Alyssa that I'm afraid it might kind of be a little traumatic PTSD from the days of COVID when we had to preach to nobody. I know when I share my screen, I'm not going to be able to see your lovely faces. So I'm going to miss that. But thank you so much for joining me. And I'm going to count on Alyssa to watch the chat box for questions and interrupt at the appropriate times for that. If I just keep talking on and on, we'll definitely save some time for the very end. So thank you once again. And here I go. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can y'all see that? Everybody doing okay? Very good. Excellent. So this is what I am here to share with you about church in the digital age. And what I'm really sharing is essentially my experience over the last 3 years at First Church. It's not perfect, but it has certainly been life-giving for me. So I hope it's life-giving for you. I've always been about vision in my ministry. And probably because of my early days as a parishioner in the United Methodist Church, born and raised cradle Methodist, I've been through a lot of vision planning kinds of things, and nothing ever seemed to stick. And I've seen a lot of visions fail. And I think these are some of the reasons. I think that we can choose a vision that is so broad, it means absolutely everything, which really means it doesn't really mean anything. And I also think that we've been negligent of the change in culture that's been happening around. I've seen visions that are top down that fail because you don't have really the buy-in. And I also seen visions that are really just unachievable, primarily because they just file somewhere and they don't get moved on. And so I was trying my whole career to try and avoid all of those things. So this particular iteration of visioning at First United Methodist Church in San Diego began with this reality. I think this is our church's reality. I think you might have similar things. This is the average membership and in-person attendance beginning all the way from 1988 to 2020. And you can see the general direction is down. And that has been the case for a long time. I really hate the fact that the last two little quadrants are Robinson, and that's my name. What I'd really prefer is if my staff person who put this together would have said pandemic. That would have been a lot, made me feel a lot better. But the point of this is that this was the reality. We were having fewer and fewer people. Oops, sorry, I went ahead and moved forward, didn't I? I am learning a new feature of, sorry about that, my mouse. Sorry about that. I didn't realize it would click. So anyway, this was the reality that we were living in. And obviously the pandemic just really highlighted the idea that we aren't seeing people in churches anymore like we used to. This is another graph that we looked at carefully from the 1988 to 2020. You could see the giving and the operating budget. And you can see that the bottom green line is the annual total that was given, but the blue line is the adjusted amount due to inflation across that time. So you can see that we were losing the battle of funding our operating budget. And at the very end, it was the last 2020, the only reason we survived were because of the government aid packages that they gave during COVID. So that put me in a panic. And I had remembered, you know, in my seminary education, Phyllis Tickle's book, Great Emergence. Every 500 years, the church is compelled to hold a rummage sale. I knew that in the back of my mind, and I knew that the attendance and the giving and the cultural shifts, all of that was happening. I just didn't know what or how exactly until I came across a book. Well, sorry, I should stick to my script. Just to remind us about the Great Emergence. This is what she reminds us about. Every 500 years, there is a change in local, excuse me, I hate talking to a computer. Sorry. There's been a shift in religions, faith traditions, and these are some of them. From 2000 BCE through the Exodus, the dynasty, the transformation, the mystery when Jesus was born. This is terminology that a professor I know has used. We know the Great Reformation is probably the biggest shift that we're most familiar with in terms of detail, because we are all Protestants. But this just shows that great change and that yard sale, as Phyllis Tickle uses it to describe. We're reminded of the fact that for each one of these 500-year changes, we see a cultural phenomenon occurring that has prompted those changes. There have been scientific discoveries, technological innovations, a crisis of authority, and new bold ideas. For instance, we've got for the Great Reformation, the scientific discovery was Copernicus, to name many, the technological innovation, the printing press, the crisis of authority, the different papal choices that they made and that resulted in Luther's cry for sola scriptura. Bold new ideas are all about the exploring the new world. We know all of that. That changed our world really significantly, and especially the faith, the Christian faith. So that's just a reminder of what Phyllis Tickle had said. And I didn't know what to do with any of that. And like this book, Jeffrey Mann had written this book, A Church as Network, Christian Life and Connection in a Digital Culture. And through this book, he helped me imagine and recognize some of the changes that we have already seen. Now, for some of you, you probably say, well, yeah, of course, why didn't she recognize this as it was happening? I'm not a digital native. I've had to learn all of this stuff. It might come naturally to you. It didn't for me. And so these revelations were really significant. And when we talk about digital culture, it means more than just having a Facebook page. It has changed our world in amazing and profound ways. I'm not going to say better or worse, it is. It has changed knowledge, the way we get knowledge. It's right now very easily accessed all across the internet. You can Google just about anything and find just about everything. And in that process, the information that we look for is reduced to tiny bytes, literally, the way it is put on the internet. And this means that knowledge is always changing. Think about Wikipedia. That's one of the hallmarks of the digital age, and it represents this kind of exchange of knowledge, the knowledge that is changing. It flows from the giver and the receiver. Wikipedia pages are community built. That's the digital world. Another focus, another area of knowledge is that it's constantly creating and it's forward focused. It doesn't look back much at all. And we can think about the way, well, shoot, I'm a Elton John fan, and yeah, no comments, please. You can just send me a thumbs up. That would be great. But I am an Elton John fan. I'm a purist. I love Elton John when he's just in concert, just him. And during the pandemic, he put out a couple of different collaborative pieces that were made digitally. You might have heard his rendition of Hold Me Closer, that he collaborated with Britney Spears. And it's a mixture of 3 or 4 different Elton John songs put in together in different orders. And it's a whole new song, and people play it as a whole new song. That's the digital world, right? There's also, well, let's see, let me change on that one. So that's just one of the ways it's changed, the knowledge in all of these ways. It has changed our faith identities because things are combined differently. That's what we're doing with faith identities as well, and traditions. So in the digital world, oh, I did again. Oh, I'm sorry, there it is. Sorry, it used to be that faith identities were inherited. You were born into a Methodist family, you became a Methodist, you learned all the traditions, you were a United Methodist, full-fledged. It was fully formed, it was fixed, it was all-encompassing, and those titles told us exactly who we are. In the digital world, traditions are sources now, literally available as bytes. And so people are able to pick some of the things from one tradition and from another, from the past traditions in history or from current trends. It's all what people use or have to choose from when we're trying to identify ourselves as people of faith. In the digital world, identities are constructed and it's ongoing. They're never finished. Now, I think about that, and I think that's probably a good thing. I mean, it signifies spirituality that is alive and growing and curious, and that's part of it. I don't know how many of you in your faith communities have already met a Buddhist Christian or an atheist, but loves to come to church to practice the rituals. That's what this looks like, right? So these are faith identities in the digital world. Sometimes my mouse wants to do this and sometimes it doesn't. I do not know the trick. Community has changed as well. It used to be that the church was in the center of the village and everything else everything was built around it. The whole village went to the church whenever they needed anything. And that was a fixed community. You grew up in that community and you stayed there. And so you were able to have long-term relationships in the community. Now, each individual person is at the center of their own community, their own network. And relationships are continually shifting and expanding and flowing. It's very fluid. People are transferred for work. That's the obvious kinds of correlation to this. But even with what's available on the digital world, we can choose to be a part of a book club that happens a long way away, and we can go to church that's across the street one week and another week. That's the kind of the way the community, the network is being built by individuals. And so relationships continually shift and they expand and they flow, very much fluid. And that also means for the church, we'll see some people for a time and only occasionally, not like the longtime members that we used to have in the church. The service industry has changed. Nonprofits are everywhere. In Colorado, there were more nonprofits, and I got to see them kind of compete for the same resources. There's so many nonprofits in that village church model. You would go there to find help to buy groceries. You would go there to do all these other things. Now we have nonprofits that do things like that. So the church isn't the only source in town. And now in the digital world, partnerships and networks are possible for the church to engage with. Pastoral role and authority used to be that the message came from that center, from the church right in the middle of the village. And on Sunday morning, the pastor told you everything you needed to know, gave answers, at least certainties, perhaps, and authority was all in the credentials. And that's all you needed. And you were honored, you're respected. In the digital world, information flows in every direction. It doesn't come from a central place. It comes from all over. Authority is in authenticity. So you have to be real and honest. And that authority and that authenticity is known in the relationships that you form. Influencers. I just met my first young person when asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? She said, an influencer. I had no idea that was a job, but there it is. Apparently it is. It's an influencer, right? That's who has authority now, because if they seem authentic and if you can see them every day on your internet or on your social media feed, that's a relationship, and that's the authority that is part of the digital world. And leaders now need to lead not with certainty or lead with the certainty of the authority that is invested in you. You lead by helping others think, by helping people find the space to process all of that information. So the takeaways in a nutshell: identity is a process, relationships are fluid, authenticity is important, conversations are two-way, hierarchy is leveled, and authority is in relationships. The implications: the church doesn't have to be everything to everyone. It hasn't been, not lately, and it doesn't have to be. We can give permission for people to find community in many different places. It doesn't have to be just at the church. And we must change our expectation of weekly attendance, long-term participation, and commitment and resources, a commitment of resources, energy, and time. People just don't do that anymore. I don't think I'm wrong in that. Is that kind of what y'all have been experiencing? I would think so. If not, bless you. Run with it as long as you can. Other implications. It's not the pastor's fault. Yay! It's not the pastor's fault. And it's not the church's fault either. We can stop working harder at everything we've always done. We know that what we've always done won't work. And we can tell our churches that, right? So here's a bit of something for we who are pastors. We can, in this digital world, offer an authentic and creative affirmation of the community's experience that helps people find their way in the world. That's one of the quotes from the Jeffrey Mahan book. And we can experiment with new possibilities. We can increase and support networks. We can communicate, listen, and speak. Listen again. We can create leadership that is democratic and shared. All of that learning that I did or discovered in not just Jeffrey Mahan's book, but a few others, led me to want to share it with my congregation, because I knew that this would be the foundation of a vision that we could use. And we began to call the process of learning and of visioning then the rewilding project, rewilding the church. And this is where I'm shifting my gears a little bit to be able to share with you what we did in order to implement a vision. So first of all, we kind of established the context, or at least I did in my brain, knowing what I wanted folks to know and learn and have that influence the process of visioning. And then we set forth a timeline. I set forth a timeline. It began in September of 2022, and we had significant things happening in January 2023, February, April, May through September, October through December, and then January 2024, we started the vision. We began implementing the vision. I share that with you because it was a full year and then some, laying the groundwork for this, and it was worth it. Okay. So when we began to talk to people about this idea of a digital world, and when they started to dip their feet into this and they saw the process of what we were going to be doing, I asked, how does this make you feel? And I am thrilled to say so many people were hopeful with that. And we're saying it's about time as well. So that gave me a great deal of assurance, knowing that what I pulled out of what Jeffrey was saying in his book and others in their podcast and such, it hit with my congregation as well. And they were relieved that it wasn't their fault too. So this is what we did during the rewilding process. The first thing we did, well, actually, I should even say before this, I began in September, which is typically our time when we begin to build a firm budget for the coming year. I began to talk to the finance committee, the board of trustees, the church council about the reality of our finances. Some of those 2 slides I showed at the beginning were exactly what I shared. And in sharing that, I said, I would like to go into a process of vision casting, of learning about the vision or the culture and discerning a vision for a full year. And so I got my central lay leaders behind me in this process, assuring them that we can watch the budget and whatever it's going to do for the coming year. It may not get better. Remember, this was at the end of 2022. It may not get better, but this is the plan I want to follow for us to find ways to meet the challenges that are coming, that we think might be coming for us. And so they got on board. And then in January, I invited all of my leadership to be a part of a book study. It was a Jeffrey Mahan book. And I also then had another group of people that were all of my staff people to look at that book study. And then I had a group of anybody who wanted to, and we cast the net wide all across the congregation. And we had about 78 people studying this book and having conversations with it weekly about that. And that was just learning the language that I wanted to have kind of be the boundaries of what we were going to be talking about in our vision casting and discernment. So the book study came first. And with 78 people, we thought that was pretty good, a good start, but we knew we had to get more and more people aware of some of these changes and this education about the world we live in. And that was when we hosted a rewilding conference. And we brought in Jeffrey Mahan and a couple of other guest speakers to talk a little bit about Phyllis Tickle's book on Friday night. Then we had Jeffrey Mahan all day Saturday. And on Sunday morning, we had Damien Jedry, who does a lot of new and creative kinds of ministries using the idea of the digital world. And that conference, we gathered about 200 people. Most of them were from my church, and we had a few others that came in from other places as well. That just allowed more and more people to understand the language of the culture, so that when we talked about vision, we would cast a vision that would be, that would recognize what's happening in culture and would encourage us to change so that we might speak to the culture more strongly. So out of the conference, it was the time to really begin to use all this information to figure out what we're going to do as a church. And we created task forces of 8 to 10 people around several different areas of the church. They were all part of the rewilding, the book study or the conference, so they knew the language, and they were then charged with evaluating everything we do within that arena and to make some recommendations that would be more conducive to being church in the digital world. The task forces spent May through September figuring some of that stuff out, making recommendations, and then we shared the results with the larger congregation. And this is one of the things that made me realize that we had been successful in trying to share what's going on through this year. We had about 200 people come to a potluck where we presented the recommendations. It wasn't that the food was all that good. It was the content. It was good, but you know, right? So that was, we shared the results so that more people were aware of it. And then as we then had the church council look at the recommendations and actually adopt them. And then we began through this process, we continued to give them updates on what was happening with the rewilding. And now I'm very, very happy to say the congregation actually speaks rewilding. They know that language. So many of them know how to explain it and what it means to the church. And that's been really a beautiful thing. So this is a little bit more detail of the task forces, excuse me. The first one we had this is some of what we have. I didn't want to give you all of it. So I can give you more if that's helpful. But this is the kind of things that came out of our conversations. The first task force was the Engagement and Discipleship Task Force, and these were some of the recommendations. We wanted to be able to use the small groups to encourage people to serve in their neighborhoods, rather than asking people to come to the church. And San Diego First Church is not a neighborhood church, so this is certainly for my context. Instead of asking people to come to the church on a Wednesday evening to do a food bank, they could find one in their neighborhoods, or they could serve in whatever way that was going on, neighborhood cleanups or all sorts of things. And they could do it right there. And those small groups would be neighborhood focused. It's not a brilliant new idea, as you know, but they offered support and encouragement for that. We also wanted to create a form of identification so that folks could wear that. That's not new either. And this, we create digital contents of a thematic Bible study. And I'll say more about that. Essentially, we had a pastor's Bible study every Wednesday at 10:30 in the morning for an hour. It was tended to be a lecture for about 45 minutes and then a little bit of conversation afterwards. It was a lot of work. And we, when the pandemic kind of allowed us to come back, we had maybe 13 people online still. We did a hybrid, and maybe 13 people in the church hall. So 26 people, and we worked about 6 hours to provide the content. That's a lot of work. So we wanted to try and do something different and to create a digital content of some similar stuff. We had a music and worship task force. Music refers to our cultural arts and events committee, offering concerts to the community. We decided we would add to our Sunday morning lineup a new service with creative space and an interactive kind of program, and we call that Tapestry. And we also revisioned the cultural events to be much more experiential than just listen to the music. We're still working on those things, but that's some of the things that came out of that. We also had the digital presence task force. And the first thing was to hire a new director of communications who knew how to do something other than a printed newsletter. And I am thrilled that we hired Megan Clausen. You might have recognized or might have noticed her name in one of the Zoom box. She is here with us tonight. She's going to answer all of the technical questions if you have any, but she's been fantastic for us. And we wanted to have the new director help us expand our digital presence, explore the monetization of our services and the digital presence that we have. She offered digital workshops to help people in our congregation know how to navigate a website. Many of them didn't know how. Many of them didn't know what a podcast was. So we created digital workshops to invite them. And we've also invested in technology. And those were all recommendations from this task force. We also had a building usage task force. And this is probably the most difficult and the hardest one to look at. But as we looked at our properties, we had the Ocean Beach campus and we had the Mission Valley campus. And we were spending so much money upkeep with and maintenance and repairs. And that was eating away so much of our undesignated foundation funds that we wanted to question whether or not that was the right thing to do. And so the team, the task force, came up with the idea to sell an Ocean Beach parsonage to be able to get a chunk of money that will help us immediately with some of the operating budget expenses. Then to explore selling the Ocean Beach property, which was our satellite church, to sell the property to a developer of affordable housing so that income can be earmarked for the longer exploration of what affordable housing might look like on the Mission Valley campus. So those were the recommendations that the building usage task force came up with. We had 3 other task forces that were active as well, caring for one another. The main task force or the main recommendation there was to be able to partner with services in the community so that we can be a resource to connect people with things they need rather than being the place where they go to get those things that they need. The Water's Edge Task Force began to talk about the way in which Water's Edge can continue on or shift in this kind of environment in a sustainable way. And we had Children, Youth, and Families Task Force. I have to be honest with you, this is the hardest one that we had to crack. It's really hard to imagine anything other than the Sunday school we have. So we've been tiptoeing around that gingerly, but those are the other task forces. I say all of that to simply present to you these kinds of principles that I've used not just at this church, but in other places where I've done some visioning. And these are what I would offer to you as some takeaways. First of all, establish a process. Figure out how you're going to set the boundaries, what you're going to talk about, how you're going to invite people, those kinds of things. Just establish that process and then share that process. Number two, be 2 steps ahead and 1 meeting beyond, which is to say that we are pastors. It doesn't mean we tell them what to do in a vision, but we lead. We still lead because we know the church and we know the obstacles that we might have. And we have to set the boundaries, if you will. So we guide the process. We can be adaptive and compromise as we need to, or explain when compromising isn't exactly what's needed or what's best. We have to know the next step moving forward. And we also have to know the boundaries of the playground. And like I said, what I mean by that is sometimes the boundaries are the church's culture, the church's finances, what's passionate in the church, the environment, the larger community, the situation, or any other outside influences that are there. So the boundaries are, I've been envisioning places where folks will say, oh, we can do this, and it's an outlandish idea and everybody gets behind it, but it doesn't quite fit. It's going to stay up there in the ether without having any legs if we can't kind of shift their direction to something a little bit more reasonable. So that's our job, is to know those boundaries. And one of the boundaries I set in this process was inviting the people who had learned the language of the digital culture to be on the task forces. And so that I didn't have folks that hadn't gone through any of that be there to kind of get us off track. Okay. 4, create many on-ramps. That year-long process had many opportunities for people to join in one way or another. We tried to involve everyone, and we communicated, and then we communicated some more, and then some more, and some more, which is to say not only in invitations, but in reminders of this is what we're doing all year, this is where we are in the process, this is what we've learned so far. And we've done, I mean, all of that. It was rewilding, talking forever for a while. And use the process, make it, stick to it. I kind of tell folks that it's a little bit like a wedding. The traditional wedding ceremony says what you're going to do, then you do it, and then you say what you've done, right? That's a little bit like a visioning process. Tell folks, get them behind you, or have them help you perfect the process as you present it to your key leadership. And then to be able to tell the congregation, this is what we're going to do, and remind people, this is what we're doing. And then afterwards, remind them what we've done. And that's really important because not everybody is going to like where your vision is heading. And you can use the process to be able to say, this didn't come about haphazardly, and you were invited into it and you chose not to. And just remind folks about that process. So vision, I think, affects administration, and it certainly did for us. We use the vision to guide the committees to be reminded that they are part of this project now. And in whatever way those things intersect, we made certain that they did, and it was that intersection was made aware. And we built within the staff that understanding of the vision and why we're doing what we're trying to do. We found a place for the staff to be a part of the vision, and then we asked for their support of the vision as well. And the vision affects teaching and preaching. All that year, there were sermon series that would come up and we talk about things, and we would preach in some of the Bible studies. We would talk about that. We would teach the history and the culture, both together. We would preach the movement of the Holy Spirit. We'd preach a theology of trust in God, and we'd model an openness to the Spirit to the best of our ability. Believe me, we weren't perfect on all of this, but this was the intent. And the consistency of change. The Bible is full of nothing but change, and it's all Spirit-led and God-driven. And so remind folks of that. And what you can do is build excitement and possibility as much as you can. These are some of the things that we did just to kind of, they were sermon series that to kind of help us tell the story differently. We talked about the Spirit's movement for several weeks, and we talked about what we can expect when the Spirit is moving. And we found so many places in Scripture where we talked about surprise and clarity and deconstruction, growth, churning, undoing, and reconstruction. And then during, this was actually during a stewardship campaign right after actually it was the year of discernment. We did a series titled Age to Age. And one week we said, Google Jesus. And we talked about the overview of what we did in rewilding. We had Share Jesus. And that's when we talked about the recommendations for the discipleship and engagement. We talked about Text Jesus, and that was where we brought in the digital world and some of the dreams we had. And then Friend Jesus, and we began to cast the idea of how we would use our buildings, especially with regards to affordable housing, to make new friends and have them be the friends that are unhoused and that might need some help. And then of course we had Go Fund Jesus, right? Of course, for the end of it. And so we had an effect on the stewardship. The reality is the resources we had were scarce for the operating budget. We couldn't meet it. And we were dipping into the foundation for years, the undesignated funds of the foundation. And the question was, we have to really pay attention to what we're doing with those funds. And we have to make sure we're investing them wisely. And so we began to inspire people with all of this instead of just maintain and keep doing things as they are. How y'all doing? You doing good? Okay, I need a drink of water. I want to share with you just some predictions that I came across in my study. I don't know if these have changed much at all. But let me share with you. These are predictions from Ryan Dunn, and he's from the United Methodist Communications, and he has done a lot of podcasts around this stuff. And he predicted, and this was a 2023, I believe, these things. I don't know if these have changed, but it's worth thinking about. He says, number one, few ministries will be geographically defined. And as he says, we've taken sermons to our living rooms and coffee shops even, right? And we're no longer primarily focused or formed on Sunday sermons. We're looking at other sources of inspiration and knowledge. We're interacting with little pieces of faith formation from multiple sources. Faith communities will be formed by values, not geography. And so we, if we are geographically defined, we have to we have to have signposts, if you will, signals of the way we can intersect with those folks who are looking for something like that. Attendance is not the metrics of the future. I'm not sure it's the metrics of the present either, but that's another conversation. That's what his projection. It's tricky. I'll tell you a little bit about what we do, but we still haven't cracked the nut. Number 3, future ministry models will be fluid and entrepreneurial, creative. You'll fail and you'll try again, and you'll fail and you'll try again. And vital churches, he says, will say hard things, and that the church will be niched. There will be something for everybody, because that's exactly how it is now. Remember back in the day when you used to watch Cheers at 8 o'clock on a Thursday night, and you waited all week for Cheers to come on, right? And everybody sat down in front of the television to watch Cheers. And now we don't even do that, right? We can watch Cheers or anything whenever we want, wherever we want, with whomever we want, and by ourselves. Why do we ask people to come to worship on a Sunday morning at 9 a.m. only? We have to be flexible a little bit. And back in the day, you could only watch whatever your parents were watching. Now, the TV shows and the things that are on live streaming, they're so specific, they can be, that you can find your niche and what you want, and you can feel like it's made just for you. This is perhaps where the church might be going. He also says that we will build ministries for people who will never join a big church. I don't know how I feel about that, but there it is. Ministers of the future will search the internet. I'm not there yet, but it's very intriguing. We got to know what's out there. And number 8, discipleship and faith formation would be less about imparting information and more about convening conversations. We heard about that one. And then this last one, pastors will take seriously our roles of spiritual development coaches. His predictions. So I want to share with you some of what we've been doing in terms of figuring out whether or not we're successful in the digital world. These are the measurements. We measure it by awareness and engagement. Awareness is, are we discoverable? Engagement is, our message relevant? And you can see some of the other kinds of things that we look for specifically. Under awareness, we search the visibility, the keyboard visibility, the branded keywords, the branded organic traffic, the web traffic, whether it's direct or new and returning, or page views. We look at all of that stuff. Social media and the relevance, YouTube, all of that we check every month, or I should say Megan Clausen does. Thank you, Megan. And we also look at engagement, how long they were on their website, how many pages did they visit, social media, the likes, the shares, all of that kind of stuff. YouTube, new subscribers, live views, video views after the fact. Email, open clicks, new subscribers, and of course, worship. We do both in-person and live stream views. And right now, I think just recently, we've had more people in worship than on our live stream. And we have intentionally made it acceptable for people to watch online if they can't make it to church. No guilt there. So this is what we have in terms of what it looks like month to month. Megan puts this out. It's awfully small, and I'm sorry about that. But this is some metrics that we can look at. We can measure the awareness from a month-to-month basis. And this is, month to month, and then for the last 3 months, and then for the last year, you can see movement going up and down, find the seasonality of some of this stuff, or perhaps it helps us fine tune what we're looking at, and all of the different categories. We look at it all. We look at who is participating with us, male, female, gender. That's the only thing we got right now. We got ages. I have to say, I am really, really jazzed about the 35 to 44 age, which is 17%, and the 25 to 34, which is 18%. I've never been in a church where there was any kind of engagement with anything we did to that extent, that percentage of young people. This in particular is the podcast. And so I told you about the Bible study that we had going every week. We decided to not have it be lecture, but rather to have two of the three pastors engage in conversation, to model that kind of conversation and engagement with the scriptures. And so we kept the topic to be the same as what you would hear on a Sunday morning. And the podcast, maybe 20 to 25, sometimes we get to 27 and we hate that, but that's about how long it is. And this is what we've got. This is this month's stats. So you can see that August, we reached a high. We reached on YouTube specifically over 1,000 views of our website. You can see some of the episodes down below, and month by month, we do a podcast every single week. And I have to say, it has been so much fun. It didn't start there, but gosh, did anybody know how to talk in front of a camera before COVID hit, right? We forced ourselves to get in front of the camera and do some of this stuff. Reverend Hannah was probably the one that was most shy, but it worked really well. We got to the point, let me just share that when we first started the podcast, we kind of still were in the habit of doing a Bible study, and we would kind of create a script and try and kind of figure out, well, you say that, and then it just didn't work very well. And we found that as we brainstormed the script, that was the interesting conversation. And so we put the scripts away and we would just sit down, maybe have a little bit of research in the back of our heads, of commentaries, things like that, but sit down and just talk with one another and always try and make it relevant. And so we're really thrilled by the success of the podcasts. You can see some of this here. And so I want to share with you also this as well, talking about giving permission to people to be at home watching. This is our history of online worship. And you can tell we had it, we were lucky. We had live streaming available in 2015, not very many people, but you can see definitely where the pandemic hit and where it was. So in 2022, we had 158 views. 158,000, views, and the total hours watched were 16,700. But this is the part that is, exciting for me. This is how we've grown, right? In 2022, that was what we had, the views and the hours watched. That's what I just shared. 2023, we had a lot more views and just about the same amount of hours watched. But look at the jump between 2023 and 2024. 321,400 less hours watched, but Megan will note that that's also because we put shorts of parts of the service on our YouTube channel as well. So they weren't as long, the segments themselves. So that's not bad. That's not bad. So that, for me, is church in the digital age. Whew. How you doing? I gave you an awful lot.
An easy question for you. Would you like an easy one? How long were you at the church before you started this visioning process?
I arrived at the church January 2020. So I was there for 10 weeks before the COVID pandemic shut us all down, right? And that was a really interesting time. And so I don't know if it's good or bad. I had to make some decisions that certainly set that church on a course. As decisions that were from the best of my ability, knowing the church as little as I did. But then also that gave me some freedom to be able to really honestly do what I think God was calling us to do and what I saw was needed.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
And so then, and the year of discernment was in 2023.
Okay, so you'd been there for about 3 years before you started it, like launched it to the church, but
That's right.
obviously you were kind of in discussions, I would say probably mid 2020 about, okay, what are we gonna do?
Yeah, we started with just a little bit of vision, some opportunities that were in front of us throughout the pandemic. And we started with 5 points of vision and we kind of worked on that. I was adamant to have something to come out toward when the pandemic lifted, when everybody was saying, oh, I can't wait till we get back to normal. I really wanted to have something that would pull us into the future a little bit more, even if it was just an idea of doing something different for our missions or whatever. So that was kind of the goal for that. And I
And
think just kind of along with that,
yeah,
sorry, you
no,
asked me one
you're
easy
good.
question, I'm spending 15 minutes on it. Um, uh, to kind of in line with that as well, all the bad news I shared at the beginning of, well, this time together, but the beginning of the process to the committees, the graphs and the downhill decline and all of that kind of stuff. It didn't surprise anybody and people knew it, but we didn't really talk about it. I was comfortable sharing it because I had hope in the process of visioning and what I had learned about the digital world. And so it was kind of like, you can have the bad nights, but we got a plan to deal with it, right? So that little bit of the same kind of attitude.
Absolutely. Great.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Like during the pandemic, our production values, people were just so thrilled to get us online. They were like, oh, hey, I can click. And, we did not know what we were doing. We were teaching from our laptops. It just wasn't great. But
Right.
now there's a greater expectation of production values. So I'm watching our services online thinking, these stink. The camera angles are bad, right? There's no editing. So what did you guys do in terms of equipment and camera angles and studio setup to address the problem of production values?
Yeah, thank you. Well, we were lucky. We had somebody who knew cameras and had a previous occupation of a professional cameraman and knew how to find the right angle. And we looked at them and we tried really carefully, especially during the pandemic, but to kind of close up the downtime in our online worship, right? To move quickly, to make sure the frame showed what we wanted it to, what's behind us, all of that stuff, to make sure that we were close enough. We just began to look at it and say, well, what would be better? And we kind of continued with some of that. You see Megan Clausen's name right here. Megan, if you, she's our director of communications. If you want to add anything, feel free to do that. So.
I always put Megan on the spot too when she's here.
Good.
Yeah, I would say that we're exceptionally lucky to have the person that we have that oversees our AV technology. Along with the cameras, the lighting is also so crucial to make sure people can really see, right? And then the other thing is just finding the right technology platform that's going to help. And so we use what's called Proclaim that allows us to then bring in our screens that has the call to worship text and the scripture text and those type of things, so that anything that's like participatory that you would do in the sanctuary, you're able to do it at home as well to make that comfortable. And so just looking at it from that point of view as well. And then also I would say our website is one that allows us to show the live stream on the website, but then we also have it, we actually host the live stream on YouTube. And so just thinking about that also, what platform are you using? And is it one that your congregation knows how to use? And if not, how can you teach it to them? So that's how we had those digital workshops. I actually had people bring bring your tablet, bring your laptop, bring your phone, and we can work through that together to see what's going to be the most comfortable for you and your needs.
We have a couple more questions in the chat about kind of that, the nitty-gritty piece. So one being, what were your first steps that you took in making your church more digitally accessible, right? So obviously the live stream is one, but adapting the Bible study was another. But what were some of those initial steps? And then how are you engaging people in conversation throughout those digital spaces? So are you, I don't think I've been at your church on Sundays, and so I don't think that you're actually like asking people questions that are watching virtually, but you're also not doing that of the people in the pews either. So, so how are you engaging digitally, and what were sort of the first steps to doing that?
Yeah, thank you. We've come a long way with a lot of different things. We first tried to do the podcast by gathering at the same time as the pastor's Bible study and listen to the podcast together. That didn't seem to meet the need, but we were trying to kind of have that opportunity to kind of have that engagement, that conversation. We have since found a different time and leadership of that, and that has grown back to pretty almost close to the number of in-person people we had for the pastor's Bible study. It's a Sunday day that during the day that we do that. So that was kind of our hope, to try and find the people who love the pastor's Bible study to find a way to draw them in. I think that was probably the wrong way to think about it, because what we really wanted, what we really were doing, we discover later, was finding people beyond the church who needed to hear that, right? So we tried to walk both lines, right? Tried to get the people who were in our church already to come. Some folks needed to be taught what a podcast was, and that was just something that wasn't always comfortable. Right now we have the 11 o'clock service, and when it ends, the podcast immediately plays. And the people gather to listen to it and then have conversations. After the 9 o'clock live stream, the podcast automatically plays, so that for those members who do want to hear, they have a way to be able to hear it without any effort on their part. And they have also a place to have conversation about it. And as far as the people, the many, many people who are listening, it sounds so weird. We're not viral, so I got to chill out on the many minis. But the people who do listen, who are not, we don't know who they are actually. That's one of the downfalls. We don't know exactly how to find out who they are. We have a Patreon account that allows us to have a chat function there. And we offer some special events, conversations with the pastors through that. So that is one way we're trying to gather the engagement of people. But honestly, we're not seeing a ton. What we are seeing is that people will come into the congregation and into the church on a Sunday morning and say, "Oh, hi, Reverend Hannah. Good to see you." And she'll say, "I'm sorry, have we met?" And they'll say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I know you from the podcast." So what we're seeing is that people are hearing the podcast, liking what they're hearing, feeling, and then taking the step to check us out as a church, what's going on there, and then walk through the door. And by the time they walk through the door, they're ready to join. So that's been the occasion for a couple of different things. So
I also want to add, because I was there last fall, that there are specific events where you invite people who attend mostly virtually to come to the campus for the one time, right? So you will say, "Hey, we're having our big homecoming Sunday. if you don't normally come in person, this would be a great time to check it out because we'll have a lot going on, right? So, and I talk about this sometimes at the Learning Lab, like there are people watching online, there are people coming to your campus for other things, and pick one thing, maybe a quarter, that you want to make sure that people that are coming or that
That's
are
right.
interacting with you already come to and feel welcome at.
Yeah.
What about giving? How are you engaging online participants in giving?
You know, the typical way, we invite folks from the podcast to join Patreon. We make it easy for our online viewers to with a QR code or text to give. What else do we do? I will also say that after the year we talked about the vision and shared some statistics, that really encouraged people to be aware of what's happening that they aren't aware of out on the digital world. And that increased some giving from our members who are just really the traditional members. So that's been helpful too. Yeah.
And then, Paula, I see your question. I'm going to get to it in a second. I'm going to tie it into something else. But there's a question about engaging children with your online participation. So I think a lot of times we focus on the adult people because they're the ones clicking the buttons usually, maybe, I don't know. But how do you have children's programming or children's message, children's moments that you're doing online as well?
No, we don't have, we have a children's message every week that engages the children. We don't have any online children's programming. I had mentioned that the Children's and Youth and Family Ministries is a hard one to crack. My perspective is that, Sunday schools formed because kids were working too much in the Industrial Revolution, right? And they weren't being educated. There were no schools. And so we developed schools and we taught the kids the Bible, and that was Sunday school, right? And it hasn't changed much since then. We still expect the kids to go an extra hour of school now in worship or on a Sunday. And I think that we have to recognize that there's so much going on in the lives of the families that we really have to meet a need. And so we've been playing with what that looks like. Haven't found something, but I'm not sure online stuff is what kids need, that the church should provide, right? We did something, of course, during the pandemic, but to have that continue on. So no, we don't.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so there's a couple points of privilege maybe we should point out. One being you launched this big vision campaign, maybe with a little bit of security, assuming that you would be at the church for a while, and you have been there for 5 years now, right? And
Yeah.
we can't always count on that in the Methodist system. But two, being that you have staff, you have paid people that are supporting this work. And so if you could talk a little bit more, you did talk about the task forces and the committees that I'm assuming were mostly volunteer led, but if you could talk a little bit more about how you engaged lay folks and engaged volunteers and how someone might scale this down a little bit for many of our congregations that have 50 or less people in them that are still looking to have a vision. All churches need vision, all churches need direction. So how would you kind of advise that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a fan of the digital age learning that we did. I mean, that really it lit a fire in my heart, in my mind, in my spirit. And so if that is the same for you, I think it really is an important way, an important piece to begin. And you can do that in a variety of ways. I could come and present something for your congregation. You can read the book together and have it be a book study for everybody in the community. Maybe that's what you do during Lent. or something. And then you can talk about some of those, the implications that you see that would speak to your context, and to try and kind of have that that dialogue, and then move into brainstorming as to what it is that fits with your congregation's passion, and to kind of continue to brainstorm some recommendations and to try something. I think the learning about the digital stuff, if you're going to head that direction, that really does give you permission to try a lot of things and not feel bad if you fail, because, you know, things are changing anyway. So I think some of those things are still at play in whatever size church that you have. You can still do the learning, you can still have the conversation, you can still invite them into some creative exploration of recommendations and goals that, you know, I might want to try to. It's still the principles of communicating often, regularly, putting some theological learning, scriptural basis behind it, and inviting people, as many as you can, through many different ways. It took a while for the buzz to grow at First Church, but you know, eventually you'll be able to do it if you just kind of keep with some of those principles.
Can I interject a couple of things too?
Yes.
So one of my personal and professional mantras is less but louder, which Reverend Trudy loves. And so really, you know, just dovetailing off of what Reverend Trudy just said is, what is one or two things that you're already doing that you think is, you know, really the excellence of your church, and then thinking of creative ways that you can leverage that. And so when I say less but louder, from a communications and digital perspective, it's like, okay, what are we already doing? For example, you know, we are already lucky enough to have a live stream, which means that we're recording our service. Okay, what are like pieces of this week's sermon that everyone really connected with? We can take a snippet of that piece and you can put it out there on YouTube, and you can put it out there on your Facebook page or Instagram. And already that's the opportunity to get more eyes and ears on that than who is going to be coming into the church itself. And so it's just looking at those pieces that maybe you already have, and that's something that a volunteer could easily do with some free programs that are out there. If you have a teenager or a college student in the church, that's a really great opportunity for them to learn about those technologies. That's going to be a really good hireable skill for them. And it's a way that then you're able to help them develop those skills and help them grow as well.
Mm-hmm. Let me also say, and sorry, I kind of took it with the vision part only. If you're talking more about, you know, being in the digital world, or having a presence in the digital world as a church, I would add that we started with the question, how do we fund things, and how are we using our foundation money, our endowment money? Those were two really important questions. And, you know, if we're going to use the endowment to help fund the operating budget, let's make sure we have the right things in the operating budget. So First Church couldn't justify or afford a fourth pastor, so we eliminated one clergy, and that helped. We also, with the plan to kind of do something different with our properties, we looked at the benefit of the endowment to be able to do different things. We also worked really hard. This was a significant thing. We worked really hard with upcoming endowments. There was a very generous, beloved man at the church who had had no family, was going to leave his estate to us. And we worked really hard on him to be able to have some conversation about what he wanted to use that for. And we were trying to avoid the phenomenon of the harpsichord account. That's what we call it at our church. We have a designated account to keep maintenance on our harpsichord. Do we have a harpsichord? No, but we still have the account, right? We don't want somebody to endow funds for something that may not last. And so we began to have conversations with him. He wanted evangelism. He wanted the church to be full again. And of course, I was a little skeptical that it would ever be full again, right? Because that's kind of just where we were and where the times are heading. And so we began to talk about what evangelism looks like. And we were able to have him embrace the idea that we could use part of his endowment for a new way to do evangelism. And we were able, he since passed, he passed before we did any of the rewilding, but it was his endowment that allowed us to use some of that endowment money to fully fund Megan Clausen's salary. So you may not have staff, you may not have a big endowment, maybe you don't have any, but maybe you can start thinking of building an endowment and just looking at that question. What is that endowment used for? Have some conversation about it with the people who have given or whose families has given, and see what you might be able to share and shift and change in those conversations.
Thank you. I think we have time for a couple more questions if you still have time. Is that okay? All right.
Yeah.
So one question in the chat, which I already put my perspective, but what are kind of, if you're just getting started on a digital presence and the budget is very small, and Megan maybe want to jump in on this to put you back on the spot, but what are kind of the first 3 steps that a church can take to grow that online presence beyond what's happening Sunday mornings or in the building?
I'm going to let Megan answer this.
Okay.
By the end of our task forces, we had 23 different recommendations all at once,
Right.
which is nuts.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell Megan,
Okay.
have Megan do that. She's more sensible.
Well, that's quite the big question. I try to think of the best approach. Well, again, I would say it goes back to that less but louder. So what do you already have content wise, right? The other way you can apply that less but louder is really thinking about, I think it's important before you jump into digital space that you really think about what you're communicating. So just like Reverend Trudy said earlier, because of the internet and because people have access to so much information, it's going to be more and more important for ministries to become niche. So, you know, what specifically are you, what's your vision as a ministry as far as what you want to communicate? And so at First Church, a lot of what we're doing really centers around justice, different forms of divine justice. And so when I start thinking about what we're going to put on Facebook or whatever, I always think, does this really align with that? So that's one part that, it's thinking about what you're going to message. But I would say that like Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and all of those platforms where people are spending their time, they're all free, right? So that doesn't take any cost to set up those accounts. And I think the next step really is educating your current congregation how to use those platforms. And so, like we mentioned before, I did a series of workshops that were in person so that I could really help troubleshoot with people. But then we also recorded those and we were able to put those on our website so people can go back and look at it. I also like printed out instructions for them. because obviously if you don't know how to navigate the website, you're not going to be able to find the recording, right? So just making it super easy for everyone, because we didn't want to leave anyone behind. We wanted everyone to really be excited and come along on the ride. And really, for me personally, it was important to equip everyone to be able to do their own digital evangelism, since, you know, we're called to evangelize as individuals, not just the pastor, right? Or not just the church. And so just really helping people and really showing them how they can engage with the content and they can share it. And then it starts to, you know, once you get everyone in your congregation doing that and they start sharing it with people, then you'll see that over time you're going to start growing your audience. And if it is valuable content, then Facebook and Instagram and YouTube will quote unquote reward you by showing it to more and more people without even having to put any money behind it. Like our YouTube channel, you know, Reverend Trudy showed you our podcast stats. The vast majority of those views are through YouTube, and we don't put any money into that as far as advertising or anything like that goes. That's all from people finding it through search, but most of it is from YouTube just recommending it to them based off of other content they've looked at. And so, you know, it's starting small and deciding what you're going to be able to do and what you're going to be able to do well, and then going from there. And you don't have to post every day. You know, you don't have to have a new video daily, right? So no, you know, don't feel pressured that you have to go into this at 500% and keep up with, you know, Pepsi and Coca-Cola and all the brands that you might see, right? Because obviously they have more people and money.
Yeah.
I would also,
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I would also suggest that as if you're still, while you're figuring out what kind of message that you want to put out there, get one of your kids, as Megan said, and show pictures. They can put together a video so quickly and easily. It is unbelievable. And just show your community having fun.
Yes.
Just
And
fun.
yeah, and like the content that we get the most engagement on still is pictures of us doing things, right? That's, people love pictures. But I agree with the teens. I have a 14-year-old and she teaches me things weekly. So and she actually helps me pick out content, and that's actually like really helpful if you have some people that aren't she's not as churched as I was growing up. I've never forced her to come to church. And so she has a little bit different point of view than what I had. Um, and so it's really helpful to use her as a sounding board to see like what's interesting for someone that maybe is spiritual but not as practiced on the religious side.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting to get some technical questions in the chat, which I am not going to field to you because I personally know that neither of you are the technical people that are editing and putting things together. So not the right people to answer those questions. But if you have questions, you can always email the communications office and we can try to direct them in the right way. But I think what I'm hearing you say is no matter what your end result is, it's really important to go through that visioning process first, and really important to go through the process of engaging your church in identifying what they want to be doing and where they want to be going, and then find the outcomes from there and work towards those. So I think that's really the key component. And I appreciate you sharing how you really brought everybody in your community through that process throughout a whole year. That takes a lot of vision on your part to begin with, and a lot of leadership and planning. And so I think that a little bit of insight into that was really helpful. So I thank you so much, Reverend Trudy, for coming and sharing this with everyone.
Thank you so much for the
best.
invitation. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm available if you have any questions or anything else I can help with. Thank you, Alyssa, so much.
Awesome. All right, well, I hope that we will see you at one of our 3, at least, sessions next week. But we will get the recording of this and the slides up by the end of this week. And we hope to see you at a Learning Lab soon. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.